welcome everyone. Welcome today to our webinar. We have Nicola Hansen from Rogers Communications, and she's presenting on reducing content while increasing engagement. The title we put down was Using New Technology to Get to the Heart of Your Message. But essentially, Nicola is going to share what they did last year to revamp their communications within a division at Rogers. And before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of context. My name is Paula Casson. I run the North American office for Snapcoms. We're an internal visual messaging. We're a software company, a tech company with some tools for employee communications. And that's a little bit about who I am. I'm going to be sort of facilitating, moderating this webinar. And then I want to introduce you to Nicola Hansen. So Nicola has been in corporate communications, both internal and external, for over 12 years. I won't run through her entire bio, but I did want to just give you a little bit of background on her. She also worked at TeleCanada doing external communications before her time at Rogers, and so she certainly has been in this space for a long time. And I think what they've done in terms of their pilot here of a new communications process is top-notch. So the last thing to mention before we start, if you're not familiar with Rogers Communications, in Canada, they're the leading telecommunications media cable company in Canada with about 30,000 employees. Is that right, Nicola?
That's right, yes.
Okay, great. And listen, now let's just get started. Nicola, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Paula. So I'll talk a little bit about Rogers. Oops. There we are. So Rogers Communications partnership is, as Paula mentioned, one of the major players in the Canadian telecommunications space. In American context, if you were to marry Time Warner Cable with Verizon, you would have essentially what Rogers represents in the media, cable, and wireless market. So we have coast-to-coast television stations, radio stations, magazine publications, as well as we own the Canadian or the Toronto Blue Jays. In Rogers Cable, we provide cable services for high-speed internet access, home phone, as well as business home phone or business products, and television cable, of course. And then in the wireless space, we've been in the wireless market for quite some time now. So that's a little bit about Rogers. What my team does specifically is we provide operational content and communication support for all of our customer-facing employees. So what that means is anything that helps an employee talk to a customer or to do their job properly for the customer is something that would come through my team. We work under the learning and enablement team, so we work hand in hand with training. And if you're looking at this Venn diagram, you'll see us in the green and the training in the blue, so we work very close to one another. And I also liaise very often with our corporate communications team to ensure that we're providing the context of our messages correctly. The employees that we service are customer-facing employees, so we have call center employees in around the 10,000 plus mark. We have in-store employees, so we have coast-to-coast Rogers stores that are around 6,000 or plus at this point. And then we have field operation employees, so these are the guys out in trucks installing Rogers Cable products. So that's a little bit about what my team does. Our business objective is to streamline operational communications and simplify messaging and increase compliance and comprehension for employees. Our motto is really going from retain to refer. So really, the refer refers to our knowledge management database, which is called IQ. So our goal is to get employees in the habit of checking IQ on every call rather than trying to retain everything that they've learned, either from training or from a message that they've read in email or from a team huddle that they've attended. So obviously there's business problems associated with this. The volume of messaging that we have both within our team but as well as externally in all the other teams is quite significant. Employees have time and time again impressed upon us that they don't have enough time to understand and act upon the information that is delivered to them. It's difficult to cut through the volume and identify information that's central to one's job function, and that email ultimately isn't the ideal vehicle to deliver critical time-sensitive messages, which is something I think we can all appreciate.
So, Nicola, can I just chip in here? So,
Absolutely.
how did you get this measurement? How did you get these stats? Did you measure?
Yes. So on the next page,
Okay.
and actually before I jump into that next page, I should say that when we are rolling out this messaging to leaders in our organization and trying to get buy-in for our pilot here, we actually rolled out a 16-foot poster. And on that 16-foot poster, we had all of the messages that were delivered to one of our call center groups in a 2-week period. And it totaled, the number that's on the screen here, it's 93,000 words, which is approximately the size of To Kill a Mockingbird. So in that same session, we handed this most senior executive at the table a copy of the book, To Kill a Mockingbird, and asked him if he would be able to read that book during the time of his job, like from 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, whatever an executive would work, and be able to answer questions based on that book within the context of his daily work. And really, we were trying to impress upon him the importance of this 93,000 words without the time to read them.
Yeah. So, Nicola, so you're talking about pitching to execs. So the previous slide, you were talking about some of the problems,
Yes.
and you were pitching to them a communications revamp, essentially, a different way.
That's correct. That's correct. So first we started with what the problem is, and the problem is really the volume of the words and without the time to read the information.
And it's just left up to them. It's just the employees have to figure it out.
Exactly. And right now, you know, and of course with executives, numbers talk. So our next slide speaks to what that number looks at in terms of time spent and the cost associated to it. So we took that 93,000 words and we looked at 200 words per minute when uninterrupted, which, as we know, that never happens in a call center, but 7 hours and 40 minutes. So obviously it's probably more than that given that people don't have uninterrupted time, but 7 hours and 40 minutes is what we came up with. So then that cost per person for a month is $253. Per year would be closer to $3,000, and then over a 3,500 employee base, it's around $10 million. So of course this is a significant number which gets people's attention.
Yeah, so basically, you know, they're not reading it because it's not possible, but at least, you know, here's what we're telling them they have to know. And if they actually were to do what we said and absorb it, here's what it would cost.
Exactly. And to your point, we know that they're not reading all of that. So what is the cost of them not reading it?
Right.
So we have higher average handle time. So average handle time is the time an employee spends on the line with a customer solving the issue for their call. We have increased repeat calls. So a customer will call back if their problem is not resolved. So obviously if they don't get their problem resolved the first or second or third time, they're going to continue to call back. So that cost, there's a cost associated with that as well. Overall higher operating costs because of knowledge gaps, reduced compliance, and it just drives, you know, increased costs to Rogers that didn't need to be there. Lower customer satisfaction is an obvious impact, which also impacts your overall brand. And then a lower ESAT or lower productivity in employees because employees don't come to work with the goal of not doing a great job. So you need to provide them what they want to or what they need in order to help the customer.
Right.
So then the next question is, are we audience focused? I mean, we're very much in a call center and retail environment here, which is a younger audience, so it's more in the Gen Y area. And as a corporation at the moment, we're communicating and, in fact, training at a place that's somewhere between the Boomer and Gen X. And I have a sort of a graph there, a pie chart of what the demographics of our audience are, and this is purely for call center. This doesn't include retail, and it's approximately 65%. But if we were to include retail, it's more like 85% because the number is a lot higher. So
retail's 85. Oh, okay.
Yeah, retail's 85.
And that's just going to grow, isn't it?
I would assume so. Yes.
Grow.
Yeah. So really, we were looking to trial three ideas with them within this pilot. So the first was we wanted to implement a new technology. No worries. People are. So we wanted to implement a new technology, which was SnapComm. So ultimately, we wanted to drive information to employees in a different way. So the second thing we wanted to do is give them the time to absorb the information so that they could understand it, know it, believe in it, and then act accordingly. And the third thing is we built a communications measurement plan that would be able to track the success of this pilot and the communications that were delivered within it.
Right. So this slide here, this is what you were pitching to the execs when you spoke earlier about the defining the problem. Here's what we want to do.
Exactly.
This is the revamp, the type of revamp we want to try to see if it'll work, and we'll measure it.
That's
to
exactly
prove it. Okay.
So that first concept, in a little more detail, is looking at a control group versus a pilot group. Our pilot group would be using SnapComm's technology. Our control group would be continuing on email. There would be no time off the phone allotted for the control group. The pilot group has two phases, one with time off the phone and one without time off the phone, and it's really just to test the tool and the differences with the on and offline time, and then measure the results of both of those groups. So our groups were 289 employees each, and we started at 325, but through natural attrition it reduced to 289 during the course of the pilot. And ultimately, we just followed them very closely and made sure that when we were selecting the employees, that they were based on, we looked at a cross sort of group of various tenures, various age groups, various productivity levels, making sure we weren't just looking at the overachievers and the people who were less productive. So we wanted just a really good cross-section of all those people.
Right.
So that's an example, or that's sort of what the pilot looked like. And the software that we were using, of course, is SnapComms. And if my slide will move to the next one, there we go. This is sort of an idea of what we use within SnapComms. So there's a ticker tool that we use for our critical or urgent messages. So this is something that we used only if there was something really urgent that employees needed to know about right now. Our alerts section, or the alert section, we used specifically for cable outages within our tech support division. The SnapMag we used as a daily, or not daily, sorry, 3 times a week. We sent out the SnapMag as an IQ Direct, and this just really allowed us to aggregate all of the stories or concepts into one place, magazine style, over the course of those 3 days. The quiz tool we used to test people on their knowledge of the content that they read within that SnapMag. We used the pop-up survey to follow up on some of the messages that we had sent to see how effective they were in their delivery. We didn't have a chance to use the interactive sort of forum feature. We had wanted to, but there wasn't an opportunity to do that during the pilot. And we, of course, used the reporting almost exhaustively throughout this entire process. We didn't have a chance to use the screensaver messaging, and it probably wouldn't work for our group, very specifically because they're a call center environment.
Oh, Nicola, that's great. I just had a question come up from Al Villiers, who is asking why you didn't use screensavers.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so for the corporate communications environment, this is something that would work very well. Unfortunately, for the call center environment, it's something that wouldn't work as well. So that's why we didn't trial it.
I just want to break in for a second, too. So I think most people on the webinar are familiar with the SnapComm software. I can see a lot of names, people that I know. But if you're not familiar with our tools, basically you can send messages out visually to the device, have a scrolling headline, that's the ticker, or pop-up alerts, or consolidated bulletins. But I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of that later on when you're describing how you use them.
Yeah.
But you can always find out more at our website if you're confused. I hope you're not. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
carry on.
The best part is that they really overlay all other activity that the person is using their computer for. So whatever application they're in, the ticker will come over top of it.
Right.
The SnapMag will come over top of it. So that's how it really cuts through the noise or the email, if you will. So the next concept, and I clearly hit a SnapComms window there.
Oh, right.
There we go.
Pop you out.
All right, there we go. So the second concept was to pilot the job preparation time. So what this is allowing the employees 15 minutes offline before each shift to read and review all the relevant content in their Snap Mags before their shift each day. So that 15 minutes was a very integral part of this. What this equation looks like here is just the idea that this 15 minutes combined with what we call KUBA. So this is basically the why in what's behind the message. So we want people to know, understand, believe in order to act appropriately. So we use this concept of KUBA within our messages in order to help construct them. And then the Gen Y communications is really the SnapComms. So basically the idea is when you put these three things together, you're going to increase your ESAT, your CSAT, and adherence, and you're going to decrease the average handle time and the repeat calls.
So Nicola, you'd mentioned to me a while back too that this was really tough to get, the approval to have that 15 minutes of time, because you couldn't just sort of have them off the phones for 15 minutes on their normal shift. You had to add in 15 minutes and pay them for that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There was two options. So you remove them from their shift for 15 minutes, or you add 15 minutes to their shift and they get paid for it.
And pay for that.
Either one has a cost associated with it. What we actually did is we used both sort of models. So we took a section of employees and brought them in earlier and paid for that extra 15 minutes. And for some employees, we did it in shift, is what we call that. And so we took them off the phones for 15 minutes. What that does, though, is that kind of it almost doubles the cost. So you're paying that employee for non-productive time at the same time as paying more employees to cover for them. So that one is a little bit more costly when you're looking at the total workforce model.
And if I suppose it's down to a science how many people you need on the phones to handle the calls. So if you're removing 280 or 50 folks from each type of call center, you may get some skewed results anyway if everyone else is having to pick up that work.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the third concept that we were really looking at, and I know this is a challenge that a lot of communicators face, is a measurement plan and what that looks like. So because we have operational messaging, we really have a good opportunity in terms of the KPIs, but I'll talk about that in a second. The first thing is looking at the readership. And so we really focused on what that readership was for all these messages and comparing the pilot group versus the control group. So that would be the number of people who opened and completed their quiz against the number of people who opened their email. The second thing we tracked was overall understanding of the information. So we quizzed all of the people who were on SnapComms with at least 2 quiz questions after every single Snap Mag that they read. We don't have a comparable data for the control group because the response rate for emails is very low, so we just don't have any comparable data there, which is of course one of the problems with email. The third thing is the behavior change or the adoption. So we really took an approach from 2 angles on this one. So the first is the adoption of the overall SnapComms tool, so the engagement with the communications process versus email. And the second is surveying for message adoption and looking at in the pilot versus the control group. So what I mean by that is we would follow up with the employee a couple of weeks after a message was sent, and we'd say, hey, do you remember this message? Did you read it? Did you understand it? Have you received a call that this message helped you answer the question on that call? Did you use the information in the email on that call? That sort of thing. So it really helped us to get an idea of whether or not that message was useful and whether the employee acted upon it. We also did a second part of that in that we got our adherence group to listen to calls and try to track down any messages or any calls that were related to the messages that we sent, and then look at the overall adherence based on that.
That sounds, oh sorry Nicola, that sounds like it would take a lot of manpower. How many people did you have on your team sort of running this pilot?
We had a very small team, but a very dedicated team. Okay. There was 4 of us.
Yeah.
But in terms of the adherence piece, we really rely on our business partners. In terms of, there's an entire team dedicated here at Rogers for adherence. So we went out to them and got them to do the call listening, and we gave them a couple of messages, and they would use whatever software they use to go into the calls and pull out as many calls as they can based on that message, and then they would listen to all those calls. So really, it did wind up in a couple of thousand calls being listened to.
Oh, wow. Yep.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
then we tracked the business KPIs. So we were tracking against average handle time, problem resolution, customer satisfaction, and commissions. And again, we weren't doing this. We were relying on our business partners to do this. So we have a team dedicated to tracking customer satisfaction. We have a team dedicated to commissions. And then the same team was looking at average handle time and problem resolution.
Great. So the data's there, and then you just break it down by your pilot groups. And
exactly. They had a list of who was on the pilot, who was on the control group, what happened month over month. So we were able to really look at that and analyze it that way.
And that's interesting. I know we get into that more later. The KPIs, this is how the VPs and the whole division is measured in terms of success. It's not the communications measurement. It's the one that matters to the bottom line.
That's exactly right. And in fact, their performance evaluations are probably based on the average handle time, problem resolution, and customer satisfaction. I think in some groups it would be the commissions, but it depends on what group you're talking about. But certainly the other three are good for all groups that we piloted.
Great.
So the next slide, and I apologize, my computer seems to be slow today. We talk about what happened. So, you know, in relation to those measurements, the first one was the readership. So the IQ Nows, and if you remember, those are the ones that are critical, urgent, happening right now.
That's that ticker scroll, getting the headline on their screen during shift?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I wish I had an example here for you, but it does just overlie everything, and it was really effective, as you can see from these numbers.
Can I ask you, when you put out a headline, did you hyperlink it? Did you make them interactive where they click to go through for more info?
All of our communications, no matter where they reside, if it's email, if it was in the IQ Now SnapComms, or if it was in the IQ Direct, link into our knowledge management database.
Okay.
So we give them the highlight of what's happening, and then we link them through to what they have to do for the
So
customer.
they go to the portal to find the details there. Okay.
That's right. And the reason for that is so that they always know and trust that everything they need to do to action for a customer is in that IQ knowledge management tool.
Right.
So this is really just meant to highlight what's changing for them, so they go there and know what to do with it.
Right.
So we had higher readership scores, as you can see here, and the lowest score in the IQ Now, in any of the ones we sent out, was the 93% there. But as compared with the lowest score in the IQ Now email is 22%. So it's quite a significant difference, as you can tell. You know, we know for certain that these people read this email within 4 hours of us delivering it. And in fact, we were judging based on 2 hours and 4 hours. Most of these read them within the first few minutes that it was sent out. So that's an impressive statistic when you're looking at these email, and we know, first of all, that these are based on opens, so we don't know if they read the message. And second of all, just in terms of reading it within the first 4 hours of their shift, we really know that the SnapComms was more impactful.
So sorry, Nicola, with email, can you track when they opened it, or you can just
yes, we can, but it's a lot more manual.
Okay, but did it take longer? It would have taken longer. They're not in their email all day.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, these numbers were within 4 hours of us sending it.
Okay.
So it's 22% within 4 hours versus the 96 within 4 hours.
Right.
And then the employee feedback on it was, of course, very positive. The information I get in IQ Now is timely and relevant for my skill set, and I like having the urgent messages scroll at the bottom of my screen. And I really believe the information I receive in SnapComms helps me to be better prepared to support my customers.
They really wrote that. They wrote that?
Yep, these are true quotes from the employees who were on the pilot.
Wow.
And in fact, we did not receive one negative comment about SnapComms, about the offline time, about anything to do with this pilot or this process.
That's interesting because, you know, when you're talking about visually putting a ticker headline on screen, it sounds like your content was pretty good and it mattered to them, because if you put something on screen that's a potential interruption and they don't care about it, or it's, you know, not important, they will complain. You know, they'll complain pretty fast that it's spam.
They will.
Especially Gen Yers, especially Gen Y.
For sure.
It's
And
really
we did have an escalation process in place. So if you had any comments or concerns about the pilot, you had a place to go to give us that feedback, as well as the managers also had a place to. We held a weekly meeting with all the managers who were on the pilot to let us know how it was going for their team and what their feedback was.
fantastic. Can you explain now a bit, I know you're probably getting to this, the black line and that 30% number on this slide.
Sure. So we did 2 phases of the pilot. So phase 1 was with the offline time, which doesn't impact the IQ Nows because this is all the ticker scrolling. There was no time off the phone for this.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the phase 2, which was without the offline time. So that 30% was just without the offline time. I'm not sure why it was 30%. I think it was an anomaly.
So it looks like you didn't send out many
we
in
didn't.
that phase 2.
We didn't. Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't. Because that phase 2 is only about 3 or 4 weeks long. And we truthfully don't send out a lot of IQ Nows. The purpose of them is urgent messages that are happening now. So
there just wasn't that much.
Yeah, we try not to send them very often unless it is truly urgent to be more impactful.
Okay.
So the IQ Directs, though, you will see those a lot more activity on the right side of that black line.
So this is the morning bulletin. This is the bulletin where you consolidate the information they should know and give them 15 minutes to read it.
That's exactly what this is.
Okay.
And you'll see the emails readership is a lot higher on these, in part because they're more accustomed to them, and even though they don't have the time off the phone to read them, they are encouraged to read them, and we also, the other one, sorry, we track only over the first 4 hours. This one we track over the course of a week, so that's why that readership number is higher than it is in the IQ Nows.
For the entire week. Oh, okay.
Exactly. So these ones, again, are based on the opens and not a true example of who we think is reading them. For
Nicola,
the blue line.
Can I ask you one more question? Do they look the same? Does the email look the same as the one that comes through the SnapComms mag?
Yes, they do.
So the visual is the same?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So then you can tell right away that the readership is a lot higher on these ones. Not as high or not as much of a difference as there is in the IQ Nows, but it is significantly higher. Yeah. I think any internal communications group would strive for an 89% readership or 92% readership. Right. So,
and this also, you were saying before, I keep interrupting you, sorry, but you were saying that it's apples and oranges a bit because the 92, the 80% is opening that, or you know they've opened it and seen it?
Right. So again, the email, we don't know that they have read it. We just know that they have opened it. With the SnapComms, we didn't use whether or not they've opened it. We actually used whether or not they completed the quiz. They actually,
they had to click and submit their quiz at the end.
Exactly.
Okay. Fantastic.
So the reason why we chose that was because the likelihood of somebody completing a quiz after having not read the message is a lot lower than somebody having just opened the message.
And is that, so that's completing, they may have got the answers wrong, or did you track whether, I think you tracked somewhere else.
Yeah, we do, and that's the next slide.
Okay.
But this one, I also wanted to talk about what happens on the right side of that black
line. Yes.
So if you notice that the line drops off there for the red, for the SnapComms, the pilot group, and it drops quite significantly lower than the blue. Mm-hmm. And again, I think this really just emphasizes the fact that that blue line is likely more around the red line in terms of true readership, and likely not as high. I mean, it's much easier to just open an email without reading it than it is the SnapComms. So I think the SnapComms is showing the true readership numbers rather than the 62%. It's probably more like 30%, similar to the SnapComms.
And so this too is, I mean, for email, they go to their inbox, they clear it, it's going to be in their inbox, and what they had to do after the phase 1 was remember to go to their SnapComms icon, click it, and open the mag, right? And you can see that 55% that first week, and then they sort of lost the habit, didn't they, a little bit? And you had your really keen, the people that were quite enthusiastic there.
Right. Left. Well, they did. We did scroll the ticker whenever there was a new IQ Direct for them to read.
Okay.
So that they knew that it was there. But we weren't tracking, and we weren't forcing readership through the offline time.
I see.
So that was the key difference there.
Okay.
The feedback on this was still very strong, though. SnapComms really gives me a lot of useful and updated information. I feel it demonstrates that giving us the knowledge we need to do our job correctly is valuable, and I know I have up-to-date info. So this is really information directed around the IQ Direct and people's perceptions of that part of the pilot.
Can I ask you one last question here before we move on?
Sure.
So for the email control group, you spoke at the very beginning about 92,000 words a month, which I assume is not just one email, it's like multiple emails all the time coming through. So for that control group, did you leave that alone? It sounds like you're tracking just one sort of summary email, one specific email, or was it all emails?
We were really trying to, for the SnapComms, we brought everybody in through the tool that we possibly could.
Right.
So when we looked at that large poster with that 93,000 words, that was really more not just looking at our content, it was looking at the first layer of content within our knowledge management tool. It was looking at all of the training job aids that go out. It was looking at all the individual emails that a site, like a separate site, would send out about activities in their department. So it was about everything that comes out from corporate communication. So it was really looking at everything within that world. Some of it we could capture within the SnapComms. So really, again, it was focused on job-related information. So everything that would have been in that training job aid would go in here. Everything that would be in the team huddle would go in here. Everything that would be related to the operational communications and how to do your job would go in here. But we still left that corporate message outside in email so that there was a clear distinction between where they go for what. I think that in an operational view, we would probably change that a little bit and customize one of the tools within SnapComms to deliver a corporate message so that we were bringing everything in through the tool.
Right, right.
Yeah. So then the next piece is the IQ Direct quizzes so that, we know that understanding leads to adoption. So what is that understanding for these messages we're sending out? And as you can see pretty clearly, the understanding was quite high across the entire pilot. Again, we couldn't have any comparable data with email because we just didn't have the response rate to be able to accurately compare them. It was really looking at, apples and watermelons. So
yes.
So a couple times we dropped below the 80% mark in the first phase, and that was the 78 and 79 there. In both those instances, the offline time was pulled that week because our service levels were such that they needed what we call all hands on deck. So the offline time was removed during those weeks, and that's why those numbers dipped a little bit, as did the readership on those same weeks. Although not as much, but
yeah. So Nicola, this is measuring the quiz. Who's taken the quiz and got the answers right? All the answers?
Yeah, this is measuring.
So 88%, 87 got all the answers correct on the quiz that would
That's correct.
ask them, just to test to see if they understood and absorbed what you told them.
That's right.
Okay.
And we were very careful with how the quiz questions were constructed too, ensuring that they were neither too easy nor too difficult.
Okay.
So that they had the information either in that message in SnapComms or within the first layer of content within knowledge management. So we really, because the offline time was dedicated to ensuring that they understood both what was in SnapComms and what was in that first layer of content in knowledge management. So that's what that was based on. All right. And then you'll see those numbers really pop up into the 95 and 94% after the offline time was removed. That's really just looking at the keeners. So, the readership dropped dramatically, but the people who were in there are the ones who are just looking for any piece of information they can get. And, who are just, they're sponges. They just absorb everything. So that's why it's a little bit higher there. Right,
because the previous one showed 30%, so it's that 30% that we're still reading it. Interesting.
Exactly, exactly. So what I found interesting about the feedback from the quizzes, I kind of operated under the assumption that people don't really like to be quizzed. It kind of reminds you of being in school. However, the feedback that we got was actually that people did like the quiz because it helped them know that they've understood the message so that they're in a better position to do their job. So I found that really interesting. It actually scored quite high on our survey.
Yeah.
So the third one was, again, the behavior change, the message adoption. So the first thing that we did was we surveyed our reps for their impression of their behavior change related to specific message. So the message that we have here is helping to reduce average handle time with a one-time payment speed dial. So what this is a self-serve option for customers who are calling in, and it was about setting up the employee to be able to speak to that customer, identifying a customer who should use a one-time payment speed dial, and then setting them up to use it so that the next time they don't have to go through the call center, which again would help our overall numbers. So the first one was read and clearly understood the message at 97%. That's how people felt about it. The second one was received a call specific to this message, so that was 77%. Helped them understand the benefits of promoting self-service as a one-time payment option, 91%, and help them understand when to offer a customer service one-time payment as an option, 87. So these are pretty strong results. The one challenge that we had here was finding messages that had clear calls that we could attribute to that message topic, if you will. And that was one of the challenges that our adherence group had as well. So even though they listened to 2,000 calls, they found a couple of calls that were similar to messages. So it really wasn't, it was like a, one type of apple versus another type of apple comparison. So it was close, and they did give us some statistics, but it wasn't close enough to really show, the difference of the tool, which was unfortunate. What we did note from that quite clearly is, maybe we need to look at the messages that we send out and if they are in fact the right messages. Because if they're not related to the calls that are coming in, then, perhaps we need to look at our overall process.
Sure.
So the next piece was the employee adoption of the tool, so employee satisfaction and readership. So this is asking the employees through a survey of their impression of the communications process. So we did 2 surveys, one pre-pilot and one post-pilot. And these are the differences that we had in these particular statements. So I read all messages increased by 51%, which matches the readership that we saw in SnapComm. So it's easy to understand.
Right.
So the easy to understand. So we want to know how easy our communications messages are for employees to understand. This one raised 14 percentage points. So that was I thought that was pretty significant. And I think a lot of that is attributed to the time off the phone to read. Because otherwise you're reading them really quickly between your calls and you don't really absorb it as much. The third piece is contains the right amount of information, and this one raised 14%. I wonder too if that's related to the fact that the control group doesn't have access to the offline time, so perhaps that message needed to be a lot shorter for them, and then how do you cram all the key messages into that really short message?
Right.
So that might be why that one's a little different. And then the knowledge management tool is easy to understand. I was impressed that this one came up 16 percentage points, and this one is particularly important to us because we were trying to understand why it would be that they found knowledge management easier to understand, and really I think it's either one of 2 things or a combination of both, and that is both the offline time to read the first layer of content in IQ, so they understood it because they had the time to read it, but 2, that they had the time to read and understand the messages within SnapComms, which gives you the why something is happening, which we know from a Gen Y audience perspective is very important to getting them to act accordingly.
So that first, the on-screen display, you made sure to say the why.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So then the help me do my job was still pretty high, and it stayed high. It went up 1 percentage point, and that the information was relevant to my job function stayed at 93%, which again I highlighted it there just because it was pretty high to begin with, and it stayed high.
I would say those, just even your starting numbers, easy to understand. CAM is easy to understand. Those are amazing for telco.
Yeah.
Okay, you're more than telecommunications, but I used to work in a telecommunications company, and their customer sat was always much, much lower. That's amazing.
Yeah, we actually do quite good in the employee satisfaction area in the call center. So yeah, that's good. So the fourth piece is, of course, the key business indicators and our key performance indicators. Okay. So we looked at the average handle time, as we talked about, and the average handle time, just as a reminder, is the amount of time an employee spends with a customer. So in terms of solving their problem. So it might include time on the phone. It might include a little time after they hang up, just finalizing what the next steps are for that customer. But it's all the time dedicated to that customer dealing with their issue. And we actually saw no statistically relevant difference. I mean, there is a lower green line than blue line here indicating pilot versus control. But the thing is that our reporting group said is that there was no statistical relevance in the difference at all.
Yeah, and you don't have the scale there. That could be
Yeah.
quite tiny, the difference. So.
Yeah, and we really were trying to figure out why that might be, but really there's a couple of things. Maybe we didn't have enough people on the pilot. We did start at 325 in each pilot and control group, and that was within the statistical relevance that we were aiming for. Some did drop off during the pilot, so we ended up at 289, so maybe that impacted. Maybe the length of time of the pilot impacted, so it could have been, we ran for 3 months, and we should have run for 6 months, so something along those lines. And of course, the third thing is, obviously, if we are not sending the right messages that answer the issues that people are calling in about in the first place, then clearly we're not going to have a lift on the average handle time.
So that's the content. Just are we getting them the content? It might be the right time, right way, but maybe the content's just not needed right this second. Okay.
Exactly. So the next piece is the customer measurement program. So after several calls, or after a certain amount of calls, a customer call, we will send them a survey. It could be a phone survey, it could be an email survey, something like that, and they get to judge what their interaction, what their perception of the interaction was,
right.
Whether we resolved the reason for their call, that kind of thing. So the tech supports pilot group consistently achieved higher scores in problem resolution. Our care pilot group performed better in problem resolution and overall satisfaction in July and August. And our sales team pilot group consistently achieved higher scores in helping customers choose the right product for their needs. But the key point in these, it sounds good, but the key point is here that they weren't statistically relevant improvements. But they were all going up in the right direction the whole time. So it seemed to me that if we had run the pilot for longer, we would have had the data to show that statistical relevance we were looking for.
Right, and you had 6 weeks in each phase, right?
No, we had the majority of
two months.
We had 3 full months
okay.
in phase 1, and then we had another 6 weeks in phase 2.
Right.
So the next one was the resolution rates. So there were modest improvements in sales and technical support for resolution rate. And for our customer care pilot, the group had a statistically significant improvement in problem resolution in July. And it doesn't say August here, but it should, because it was in both months that we saw that. We could not find the core reason for that improvement, so we couldn't definitively attribute it to SnapComms, but I'd like to believe that that's where it came from. So, so that's the resolution rates. The next one is commissionable sales. So we couldn't look at the sales as a whole, so we looked at the commissions earned from those sales. And again, there was no statistical relevance between the pilot group and the control group, but what we did see that was worth mentioning on this call here is that the Gen Y group performed statistically relevant improvements over, they were better. They had higher commissions over the course of the pilot from beginning to end than their counterparts in the Gen X or Boomer generation.
And that's the gray line there. That's
the gray line at the top. Okay. And it was a significant difference between their next one, which was the Gen Y. So the thing that's interesting about this here too is the fact that when we removed the offline time, the Gen Y group was the one that suffered the most. So
they suffered the most.
Yeah, their readership numbers dropped the most.
Right.
So they earned more commissions and therefore had more sales when the offline time was included, and they had the lowest readership when it was removed.
So the Gen Y, you said Gen Y makes up the majority of your call center, your audiences.
That's right.
But in the pilot, I think you mentioned to me the pilot wasn't necessarily representative of that breakdown.
No, we were trying to go for, a representative sample,
Right.
but I think it just turned out that once the attrition happened, we were
Right.
at a place where the Gen Y turned over more than any other group. So
As well. Okay.
yeah.
You were
So then,
saying before too that you thought that oh, just with the Gen Y about them needing it more, that getting it to them at the right time visually on their computer in a different way.
yeah,
Email just doesn't work for them.
that's very true. They tend to react to smaller chunks of information, bullet points,
Right.
web type content. So the KM stuff works very well for them that way. But also videos and audio and graphics work better for them. Um, just the
Right.
Gen Y type. Yep. And then employee satisfaction, the overall satisfaction with the SnapComms tool. So this was, again, the final survey that we sent out. We not only looked at the overall communications process and how much they liked that, but also the SnapComms tool itself and what the overall impression was. And most people believed or liked the IQ Direct magazine at 95%. They felt the quiz helped them do their job at 90%. I'm missing the number here for IQ Now Ticker, but that was 86%. I felt that helped them do their job better. The offline time was 96%. The outage notification window was 86%, and the message history window, which is just a little message window that you click on to pop up to see what messages are waiting for you, was actually 83%. I was surprised that that one was so high, but really they really liked the tool. So that's where they they just let us know. And we put a couple of other employee quotes here just to really emphasize the overall impression. And it's helpful. It gives you enough time in your day to go through all the updates. It's brief. It's to the point. It's easy to understand. The quiz is helpful to test how much we understood. The pilot made it easier for me to find information. Thank you. So as I mentioned before, there was no negative comments about the entire pilot,
Yeah.
the SnapComms tool, or the process that we used. There was a couple of feedback requests in terms of, we really like this tool, maybe look at using it for this purpose or that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it was a really strong positive reaction to it. So overall, as looking at the program, we had high readership, we had employee satisfaction, but we hadn't really proved effective on KPI.
Right.
And again, I think that's primarily related to the messages that were sent out in it. So that's kind of where this landed.
So then what happens next? So you basically you looked at your problems, you came up with a communications revamp, right?
Yes.
With those 3 elements, and you piloted it. So I would assume that, paying for 15 minutes of offline time, they're not going to do it if the KPIs aren't proven. What are the next steps for you? I mean, it's fabulous. It's such a rich amount of information you've got back. So I assume you're looking at tweaking it. Well, it wasn't quite right. We got some of the results, but not all. So what's the next steps?
To your point, the executives really care about those bottom line KPIs. Like that's their bread and butter. That's what they really care about. And to that end, we are not in an implementation phase right now because there were other things that they could do to raise the bar on those particular KPIs. So they're focused on those particular initiatives at the moment. So in the meantime, we as a communications department are taking off and looking at the types of messages we send out. So how can we be more impactful and make sure the messages that we are sending are related to the calls that are coming in, so they really do help employees solve the reason for customers' calls. And after that process takes place, then we will revisit the overall tool and see what the next steps are.
Fantastic. So you've got some exciting communication vehicles that your audience likes. Yes. And now it's sort of okay, we got to figure out how to use them so that third one turns green as well.
Exactly, and that's where we are.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, thanks for that rundown. It's fantastic. I know you had a business analyst on your team too that helped sort of wade through all the data, didn't you?
Yes, I had a fantastic team. We had 4 people. We had a coordinator, a manager, a senior analyst, and myself. And then we relied on our larger communications team to help with the content.
Right.
We had a fantastic process in terms of we set up editorial boards for each of the groups who were on the pilot. So it was up to that editorial board to really vet all of the content that was going into SnapComms, to go out and get more if that 15 minutes wasn't filled. So we were really looking at it like an online show, so that we made sure we capitalized on every minute of that 15 minutes and making sure it was useful, relevant information. You know, overall the process was working. So, and because the readership was there, that's why I think if we can just sort out the making sure we have the messages exactly right, then that last button will turn green.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nicola. Appreciate you putting in all the time here to share this with our audience. I know there's just so many people who have been really fascinated, you know, to actually have some measurement and some details like this. Now, I'm going to wrap it up there. We don't have any additional questions right now. There's been a few questions that we've answered online during the meeting, which hopefully you've seen. But here are Nicola's contact details if anybody wants to reach out and find out more. And also, you are certainly welcome. You know, I have to put in a pitch for our software tools as well, although I know that's only a small piece of what you've done. But you're welcome to come to visit our website at snapcomms.com, and you can sign up for a trial and test out our software if you think you might find use in your own company. But just back to this, Nicola, thank you so much, and certainly keep us posted, and we'll probably you know, see if we can book you for an update in 6 months to see what's happened next.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.